I'm Michael Killen, and I've been working on analyzing and identifying 15 key developments that will shape our economy, your lives. I call them zeitgeists. They are the developments of our time. And I have been making paintings on each one of those zeitgeists. And to some extent, when you look at the paintings or think about it or hear what I have to say, you think I might be a negative person. But if anything, I'm really a super positive person because I am working hard to help bring attention to the public of things we need to address now. And now, as we go forward, I think the telecommunication networks will become critical for helping to pull people together and deal with some disasters. I've invited Charles Brett. He is an analyst working with Constellation Research, an important research company located in Silicon Valley. And I want to ask him a series of questions about how resilient, how will the mobile communications network hold up if some of the things I think are going to happen. Charles, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. And these days, you're a vice president of Constellation Research.
I've reached that dizzy height.
Good. Tell me, you know how I think now, okay? And when 9/11 came down, you know, the cell phones everywhere, you know, in that area stopped working. People couldn't communicate. What's going to happen if we have another 9/11? Are the telecommunication systems going to be there for us?
I actually don't worry that much about another 9/11. I mean, 9/11 was a ghastly event and so on, no doubt about that. But it was a man-made thing, and it was a disaster, but it was quite confined to a quite small space in Manhattan, not even the whole of Manhattan.
You don't worry about it?
No, I don't particularly worry about that in the terms you're talking about. The things I worry about are things like earthquakes and tsunami, major disasters which affect millions of people.
Good, good.
And the difficulty you come into here is that most telephone networks are designed only to be used like at 4 or 5% usage. And you're absolutely right. When 9/11 happened, everybody called in. When Loma Prieta, the earthquake here in California, happened, I think in 1989, I was in the south of France, and there were various, at a conference, and there were various of my friends and colleagues who wanted to find out what was going on in California. We picked up the phones and tried to call and so on. Okay. The way we actually discovered things probably weren't too bad was one of them could log on to a mainframe here in the valley, and then we knew that there was power and there was some communications and so on. But the telephone network couldn't actually handle it because it's really not designed to handle 100% usage. It's only designed for like 5–7% usage.
Okay, so you're worried about big things like earthquakes. Right. That's good. Volcanoes, me too. But you're saying to me these telecommunication systems are designed not for the great volume, and if they didn't have so much calls during a disaster, everything would be fine. But I'm under the impression for example, in buildings, the switches were knocked out, and during an earthquake, you are going to have poles knocked down, microwave stations. So tell me, are you saying that we don't have to worry about physical damage to the network during a disaster?
Well, here's an interesting thing. The fixed line network is actually probably more exposed in an earthquake or a tsunami or whatever, because everything tends to go back to fixed points. Actually, mobile networks are much more flexible. You can lose bits of them. There are still other ways to communicate because it's a cellular structure. Another great thing about the whole mobile environment is you have batteries. And so as long as you've got some access to, let's say, solar charging or whatever, you have a certain time on your battery on your cell phone or whatever to be able to make contact. Equally, lots of the cell phone towers can be solar powered. At the Barcelona big conference, Mobile World Conference, there were people selling towers powered by wind, by solar, by whatever. So the infrastructure in many ways is much more resilient and much more effective. Now there's a flip side to this. When disasters occur, the United Nations has a unit stationed in the south of Italy in Brindisi, and they like fly in 3 containers into a disaster area, so like Haiti or Aceh, or it didn't really apply in Japan because they had the infrastructure themselves. But these 3 containers, one is a mobile switch, one is a diesel generator, and the rest is fuel and whatever's necessary. And literally they can get those, as soon as they get that on the ground, all the emergency services can now start talking to each other, and in a way that they couldn't do. So, you know, the medical people can talk to the military or whoever's organizing the rescue, and you can have a satellite link up to the rest of the world. And so mobile actually changes the way you can react and start helping people. So there is a very positive side to this.
Okay, I'll pick up on a couple of your points. Yes, mobile has to be more resilient than wireline, because the wire gets broken, it's all over, but it's more difficult to interfere with transmissions through the air. And then you made a point that some of the power is distributed right to each individual. We all have our own batteries, and it'll hold us in place. You didn't really address the capacity issue, you know, everyone calling at the same time, overloading the system. And with that particular point, I want to ask, you're from the mobile industry. You know those suppliers. Do they think the way I think? And are they preparing for not just a 9/11 or an earthquake occurring on the same day, but also maybe a whole breakdown of the entire world financial system? Are they thinking of having the systems in place to meet major breakdowns or near collapse of certain societies?
Well, I think the simple answer is no, and I wouldn't expect them to, because there's no real financial incentive. The interesting point, I think, is the first point you made, which is about occupancy. You know, if it goes up to 10% and then becomes saturated, what I suspect we need is a protocol in place that if there is an earthquake, like say here in California, that the rest of the world doesn't try and call in, but allows the people in California to call out. But even so, there's going to be a problem. And if you use SMS or if you use email or whatever it is, these are the things which actually will allow you to communicate out. And you probably don't need occupancy rates or the ability to handle occupancy rates above about 20%. Networks are built to, you know, create money, to make wealth for phone companies and so on. To ask them to over-provision doesn't really make sense. Or perhaps the government could insist on it, but then the government would have to pay for it. So there is a balance here to be drawn. But I think the bigger issue really is this one about how people behave in a disaster, especially those not in the disaster area. And I don't think we as society have really thought this through, that there should be a protocol or a set of rules, or go on, don't try and call in, let everybody call out, or however you like to style it.
So it seems to me that I'm aware that governments, especially the developed governments, are aware of we are heading to an environment of having more stresses on our interconnected networks, on our society, on banking, all of that. And we've had now a taste of it with increasing forest fires and floods, etc., and 9/11. And we've come to an environment where a very, very small group of people who are disenfranchised in our world, you know, the very, very poor, are now going to be able to, with very little by doing something here or here or here, cause great problems. Our governments know about this, and I guess they are working on it, but you're telling me the industry that you are very much involved doesn't see it, or is not incentivized. There's no money for them.
There's no obvious money for them. One of the areas I would like to see much more is governments or phone companies actually doing something like what the United Nations is doing for disasters, but within countries. So if there is a problem area, that you can bring extra capacity in very quickly. I am not aware of any really significant initiatives there.
Okay.
I would like to see them.
Okay. And now I'm going to shift the subject to a little bit because I think you and I have known each other for 20 years. And I know you have been deep all your life in complex computing systems. Complex computing systems, I mean massive computing systems. And I've gone to you often for insights on technological developments. And now we have these very interconnected telecommunications networks. And I'll just give you a sample of it. It's like the iPhone. It connects to my computer. It provides me telephone service and all sorts of different things. One little piece of that system goes down, and I can be greatly impacted. And that's on the small scale. Now, when we hook all of these up worldwide, we have an extremely interconnected world. And normally, this has been very valuable to be interconnected, all the synergy. But there's a negative thing. If something goes wrong, it could cascade, whoosh, and in the cloud. We only have about 2 minutes left. Cloud computing. Are we setting ourselves up by being so interconnected, telecommunication, the cloud, et cetera, and all of that, the internet, GPS, that we're heading for a disaster one of these days? What do you think? You got about 1.5 minutes,
Well,
Charles.
we could be. But I don't think so, because in one sense, we're actually building a set of systems which have so many, the danger is they've got so many moving parts that one of them stops. But the strong point is that you've got backups and different ways of doing things, and there are different alternatives, and so there are more choices to get some form of communication. So I think the jury's probably out as to whether it's as exposed as you fear or as resilient as I hope. Let's just hope it doesn't happen.
Okay. Now, you wrote Making the Most of Mobility in the Enterprise. And I bring that up maybe even though we can see you're very knowledgeable, but to bring it up that you've been thinking deeply about mobile networks and the business opportunities and the challenges enterprises face today in taking full advantage of them. Am I correct?
That's absolutely right.
And are you having fun doing that?
It's very interesting. And what's the most interesting bit about it is how mobile devices and mobility completely changes your business model if you open your mind.
Okay. So I'm going to say thank you, okay? And hi, I'm Michael Killen, and my guest has been Charles Brett, and he works in Israel, Spain, and the United States, and I'm pleased that he was kind to share that the industries that he services, the suppliers as well as their customers, do not think the way I necessarily think about how our civilization and society is moving forward. I think that's fine. They're allowed to think differently. And but to restate my position, I think we're heading to a society, a time of great challenges where many, many of our systems are stressed, and we have to today start preparing these things. Again, I'm Michael Killen. Thank you very much.
You'll be done.